Okay. Again, one more time, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the webinar, DevOps and Telco. This is the webinar of February, and it will be about the DevOps and Telco. The last one was about the cloud enabling 5G. So we continue assessing these kind of topics related to telecom domain service providers, combining cloud and DevOps and this kind of software components. So let's start. And before I start, there is a Q&A module in Zoom. You can use it at any time to ask questions. After each section, I will have a look to the Q&A, and I'll try to answer the questions. If not, I will have that answered offline. It's 1 hour webinar, so let's just start. Okay, for the colleagues who meet me for the first time, my name is Kareem Rabia. So I'm an ICT consultant with almost 17 or 18 years of experience. I've worked on multiple domains of the industry, starting from data networks, mobility, packet core in particular, OSS orchestration, and cloud for sure. And I'm currently working on Red Hat as a senior telco architect, and I have multiple previous roles at NEC, Netcracker, Tech Mahindra, STC, Nokia, Huawei. So I would say claim that I see the industry from different perspectives, because I was working on different seats, like as a vendor, as a system integrator, as a customer. I tend to always use a standard language as much as possible. In addition to the practical experience, I had some involvement and contribution to the community working groups like ETNFV, OpenNV, and some effort with ITU and CNTT. So I hope you will all enjoy the webinar, and please don't forget that you have the Q&A module at any time. You can just post your questions. Okay, so we start. So I usually start my webinars and even any kind of talk about technology. I tend always to bring a sort of a brief or overview about the history of evolution. How did we evolve to reach what we are talking about? But I will make use of this timeline to clearly position, let me say, the maturity index of cloud-related technologies on the telco in general. I have picked like 6 main milestones on the long history of these technologies. So let's just take it quickly and see the timeline. So the start, in my opinion, was 1963, when this kind of project MAC has actually proposed the idea of working with computers as a public utilities. So that was like the initial idea of going to cloud. Like we have like some sort of computer systems, and that project aims that this project can be publicly shared or shared by a group of users. And that was actually the first step toward the concept of the cloud. That was in 1963. In 1972, that was the first VM-based, or the first commercial product VM-based for IBM. It's a little bit funny because it's 1972. And actually, we got this idea in Telco in maybe 2012. You'll see that in the timeline. But I was really surprised that virtualization emerged in the 70s. Maybe there was no real adoption by that time, but that was actually the kickoff of the virtualization. And actually, in 1999, maybe I didn't bring that, but in 1999, VMware had their own first hypervisor or VM product. So that's also a major milestone. But in 1999, we started to see the evolution of public clouds. So we started to see software as a service coming from Salesforce, for example. That was like a CRM, cloud-based. And then after that, many platforms emerged, like AWS, Google Doc, and I think in 2012 that was the iCloud. So from 99, that was the rise of the public clouds, and there was a good pace of virtualization going on. There was a good experience in the market for people working on software development and virtualization. So till that time, you don't see actually the telco, I would say, intervention or the telco presence in the timeline, because till that time the telco was doing the very legacy stuff like the GSM, the 2G, dealing with boxes, with proprietary solutions. So there was no real focus or any kind of intention of adoption any cloud techniques in telco. In 2008 and 9, that was the evolution and the rise of the DevOps. And I think the pioneer was Patrick Dupois. And in 2008, the idea of DevOps was introduced in one of the Agile conferences in I guess in Chicago. And in 2009, that was the first event under the name DevOps Days. And I think DevOps Days is still going on till now. So you still have this event in all cities. I think it was in Cairo last year. So the DevOps evolution 2009, it shows you that there was some sort of a journey of software development, of cloud-based stuff, of software-related evolution. And in 2008, 2009, that was an idea to enhance this kind of software delivery methodologies, a new idea of what had been done in the past. But if you search on this timeline on where is the telco presence, you don't find it really. And that actually shows the idea about the maturity of the software mindset on the telco side. So I would say confidently that before 2012, like before the rise up of NFV, there was no real attention from the telco to embrace any kind of cloud-based solution or even software-centric solution, software products. All the focus were on the the legacy product mindset. But in 2012, that was the first white paper of NFV, and that was the kickoff for the telco cloud. That was the real moment when telcos start to embrace the cloud technology. And I got another one, I mean, from 2017, because it showed how DevOps succeeded to spread across all communities. So in 2017, there was a report from Forrester that 50% of the organizations are adopting DevOps. While in 2017, for example, for the telcos, that was still a struggle to build the telco clouds and have the NFV successful. If I may take a takeaway here or a key message from this slide, that telcos are not in that evolution or race, cloud race. They're not there since a long time. They are just newcomers compared to the experience done on the software side, on the IT side, on software development. So that justifies why there is always not resistance, but that justifies why it's not easy to embrace new technologies related to software and cloud, because this is a little bit different from the telco mindset and telco focus. Let's move forward. So we I'm talking about on telco behalf because I belong to the telco community at the end. Telco community are used to standard definitions. So whenever there is a standard definition, it is easily to be followed, it is easily to be deployed and even maintained. But whenever the community meets a definition or a term that may look as a buzzword, that have multiple definitions in multiple contexts, this actually causes a little bit uncertainty about how to adopt such technology. And DevOps actually is one of these examples. So I brought some definitions from some context. Let us read them together, okay? And then I highlighted some keywords that we will use in this webinar to stress on and to explain. So from Wikipedia, this is the definition. So for Wikipedia, DevOps is a set of practices that combine software development and IT operations. So we are talking about some practices, okay? And these practices, by the way, are the trending terms that we always hear about, like CI, CD, CT, orchestration, microservice. These are the practices. So these practices combine software development and the operations. And what is the goal? The goal is to shorten the system development life cycle and provide continuous delivery. I will not read the whole definition, but I just extract some keywords. So there should be a development life cycle. You should be developing something, and you are combining both development and operation. Okay. Why I'm stressing on that? Because at one stage we will map that to telco environment, and you will see that one of the obstacles is actually the applicability of that definition on the telco environment. If you are not a software-centric environment producing software products, then it will be very difficult to map such definition on your environment. One of the key terms here in the definition is actually the agile software development. So it's seen that DevOps has extracted some or has made use of some concepts on the agile methodology, and that's why I'm explaining the agile software delivery on the next slide. So it is important also to understand where the DevOps is originated from. Another definition from AWS. So the keyword here is actually, it's not just practice, but the culture. So it's a combination of cultural philosophies, practice, and tools. Three main things, three pillars. And again, they are very important. That it's a culture and set of practices and tools. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about these three. I'm going to try to explain what is the culture in the telco, how to adopt such a practice in the telco domain. This is hopefully the goal of this webinar. And I'll extract another thing, which is deliver application and service at high velocity. So you should be delivering applications. And that's very important because, again, when you map this definition to a telco environment, when the telco environment is very static, doing like business as usual, no innovative, for example, enterprise solutions or products, no internal, even, there is no kind of internal software delivery between teams or between departments. So if these are not there, then applicability is really a challenge. From Agile, so it's a compound of development and operation. So we are talking here about people, process, and technology. And people and process is actually very important because one of the issues of the DevOps on how you understand DevOps, that you only focus on tools or technology, and you start here terms like products, right? Like Jenkins, Ansible, Chef, Puppet. You start to hear these terms, right? But what you'll see that it's not just technology. Even technology is a very low percentage of the overall equation. It's all about people, about culture, about process. And then the last one, from Red Hat, I brought here one new term to be assessed, which is the automation. So you find that automation is one ingredient of the DevOps. You will see on how we move from one state to another in the software delivery life cycle via an automation workflows. So automation is one of the ingredients of the DevOps. So in order to understand the DevOps, you need just to get a little back and understand the traditional software delivery model or software delivery model in general. And maybe that's something new for us, for people working on telco, because this is not how we interpret delivering a certain value to the market. And actually, I brought this diagram. You'll see it in next slides. So the most common and traditional way of software delivery, and even for project delivery currently, which is the waterfall. So waterfall, and I'm sure most of you heard about it, is a very sequential linear delivery model. So at each stage, you provide a certain value that's actually being handed over to the other stage. So it's a very sequential project delivery or software delivery model. And if you may interpret this kind of flow, so you start with some business requirements. For example, some stakeholders or some enterprise customer is coming and say, I need a certain app or a certain product. that provides certain service or value. So it's just a business requirements. So sometimes or usually you need someone to transform these business requirements to technical requirements so that developers can understand. Either this is done by business analyst or by any title, but it's one of the early stages. And then once technical requirement is there to the developers start to prepare the code who will provide this kind of these features requested by the business customers. So at that stage, the teams here are all about software developers, business analysts, which again can be all lined or titled with development. And then once the code is prepared, there is a stage where you integrate this code to the main repo that include maybe the original code or previous iterations of the code. That's a good integration. And then you do some testing and quality assurance before you release the software. And once you had like a positive indication of the quality assurance, you start to release. So at that part, and even whatever after releasing, which is maintaining software, is actually the quality assurance and the operation, or you can refer it after that to operation. So you see that the pipeline is not, doesn't have like a closed loop. So it is one pipeline, and each team doing a certain function, if you can interpret, it actually has different objectives. So because developer, they want to develop the code, QA want to make sure that there is no bugs before you deliver, and operations, they want to make the customer happy, right? And they will always strive not to do changes on what is deployed, because this is actually affecting the stability. So this has been the legacy way of delivering software, and most probably you can map that to the telco, because if you take any telco project, most probably with a big percentage, it will follow the waterfall delivery model. So that was the waterfall. Agile came with a new methodology that actually made some change to the concept and bring the concept of providing some sort of iterative approach, okay, so that you can continuously deliver on what we call like frequent small releases. So you don't need to wait till the whole project is completed or to take acceptance, or the whole software to be developed to have to pass to be passed to the QA. No, you can start to, for example, work on an MVP, minimum viable product. Like that's the most basic features that market can request. So you can go to the market, for example, with a list of basic features, and then you start to make new drops, or MVP 1 or MVP 2, MVP 3, to add more features and launch your products in drops, or in what we call in sprints. That was good. That was good approach. But if you can even interpret the logical flow that I'm bringing here, it's not including the operation into the equation. So it's a nice thing to make sure that you get the requirements and you continuously delivering. But what was taken on the Agile by that time, before the DevOps rise, that most of the pressure was on the development, okay, and QA. But at the end, operation, there is no any kind of closed loop control that, for example, anything that identified in live production environment cannot be fed to the developers again. So again, they were both silos, and they were both having different KPIs, although there were some enhancements in the on how you develop and deliver the software. So I will take just one question, and then I will show you how actually DevOps now complete the full map. So yeah, okay. Just please, guys, use the Q&A module, not the chat, for me to follow. Okay, so we saw the waterfall, we saw the Agile, and actually, as I told you in the timeline, the DevOps was explained in one of the Agile conferences in 2008. So it was perceived like an enhancement or an evolution to the Agile methodology. So DevOps actually it offered or it proposed the infinite loop DNA. I call it DNA of the software. That loop should be seen as an infinite loop. You know, this kind of that it's not just like a flat pipeline where you just deploy and forget about it. No, it should be like some sort of a continuous stuff, an infinite loop. And that actually what created what you are always, I mean, what you always see in everywhere, which is the simple of the CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous delivery or deployment, whatever. So this DevOps now engaged the operation into the equation, unlike the Agile. So now you can still have this iteration. So you do the planning, coding, and testing, and then you release. However, after you release and you deploy, you can still operate and monitor and have this kind of feed of monitoring to the CI stuff, CI environment, or to the development phase. So that was the high level or the idea of the DevOps, for sure, in addition to the combination of the teams, but the idea of having this infinite loop DNA, that was the main pillar of the DevOps, that software delivery should be perceived as a continuous infinite loop process. You don't just deploy and forget, and then developers get the KPIs and operation take the handover and they do all the this hectic stuff. No, it should be seen as a continuous infinite loop. So from concept perspective, so there is a development team, there is operation, and there is quality assurance, and I mapped that to the software delivery pipeline that I showed in the previous slides. So DevOps, even by definition, they are combining these three teams, okay, by a set of practices. It's not just combining from organizational perspective, like we go for a flat architecture and then all the teams now report to one manager. This is not the goal. The goal is having a kind of practices that actually combine these three teams together. For example, instead of the developers only focusing on delivery and operation, or Q&A focus on testing. So for example, if we have a practice called continuous testing or continuous integration, maybe this practice can combine both teams doing this kind of practice. So I'm bringing back now the definition after what I explained, and I think now it's more easy to interpret the definition. So it's a set of practices that combine software development and IT operation. It will aims to shorten software development life cycle, providing continuous delivery, and it is complementary with Agile software development. I explained that, and several DevOps aspects coming from Agile methodology. So that's how the idea was formulated and how we interpret it now. I got one question before the webinar about the DevSecOps. Where is the security part of it? So DevSecOps, it's simply, if you go to this one and you add security, so security as a department or security as a compliance, what they usually do in the past years, they put some sort of requirements, some sort of compliance that any software product or any product should comply to. But they come at a later stage, for example, at the acceptance. You get a security acceptance, yes or no. But with DevSecOps, you can involve the security team and engage security procedures from the development phase. So across the software delivery cycle, security is engaged in all phases. So they make sure that security procedures and requirements are enforced from development to integration to testing to delivery. So that's actually the DevSecOps. It's not different in the logic from the DevOps. I end this definitions by I would say, solid definition of a DevOps. So DevOps is three things, And the most important one of it is the culture. So it is a culture of collaboration between teams, sharing common goals and KPIs. So that's number one, and that's the big. I would say I would put the biggest weight on this part, and a set of practices enhancing the software delivery process. So you move with these stages in an automated way, in a collaborative way. You do a continuous integration, continuous testing. These are the practices. We will have one slide about it. And at the end, you need to have a technology part, tools that are realizing these practices and making use of the environment made by the culture. These tools are the trending names that you all know. But, these kind of products like GitHub, Jira, Ansible, Jenkins, everywhere. There are a lot of huge list of tools fitting in each stage of the CI/CD. So starting from now, I will take each one of these aspects, culture, practice, and tools, and I will do a mapping on the Telco domain to see actually what's happening on the Telco. Let's see if we have any questions before I start. Okay, I have one question about the testing phase before launch phase, vendors or carriers will do. So I will explain that in the analogy in the telecom, what's happening in the telecom, and who will do what. So I will answer this one. And there is another question about the slide. Yes, I will provide the slides, and a question about the infrastructure as a code. Yes, infrastructure as a code is one of the practices of the DevOps. So we will cover that also in one of the slides. Could you please share how can we become telecom DevOps? My last slide, actually, I'll talk about the opportunity, how to evolve or how to introduce the DevOps. And there's a question about the mindset, how the mindset is introduced to the team, especially telco background mindset. It's a journey of learning, but there are some courses actually in the market that talks about only the culture. What are these mindsets? So I can share some stuff about this point. So let's go. And that actually would be interesting for people who are not working on telecom to understand how does the process there, how does the culture there. So I named this one the box culture. Okay, and I'm not here to criticize any entity because at the end I'm part of the telecom community. It's my tribe, but let's try to interpret what's happening and how DevOps can influence such culture. So in telecom, in order to have a scope or in order to have a product or to introduce a new function or whatever, there should be what we call a demand. Okay, so for example, this demand can be a business demand. For example, your business unit is trying to sell a new product to the enterprise market, and to realize this product, you need to have a budget, right? You need to develop a solution or purchase a solution. So that's the business part. From technology perspective, for example, a certain operator, he wants to be always number one market leader. He wants to keep up to date with the latest technology. So for example, I want to go to a 5G. I want to do a 5G SA deployment across the nation. So that brings a demand, and this demand needs a budget allocation to realize this demand. Or a forecast, for example, that you are delivering, if you're having a certain throughput, certain capacities in your network, and then you have a forecast like next year, this is going to increase. So this kind of forecast is being noted and delivered as a demand. So all this at the end comes to what we call in the operators a demand committees, or maybe another department looking on this request. But at the end, this demand committee is responsible to filter these demands and to allocate budget to get these products or to actually realize this demand. At the end, this goes to a stage where procurement collaborating with the design teams or planning teams. They can be named the planning sometimes and design sometimes. And we can map, for example, design or planning to development in software terminology, but this is the case where this budget is allocated and then the team who requested this scope is informed, and then the team with the procurement start to work on RFX drafting, which is RFI, request for information, or RFP, request for proposal, or RFQ, whatever. And then this RFP goes to the vendors, and then the RFP is awarded and the contract and scope is issued. The box culture comes here into the picture in two things. First of all, the telcos are used to purchase a box. For example, they purchase a gateway, they purchase a router, does routing functionality, switch, does switching functionality. They purchase a BRAS, they purchase a 5G core. They don't purchase something that needs effort or needs development to work as it is meant to be working. It is meant to be. What I mean here, that they put requirement specifications to purchase a box, and whoever gets provide this kind of requirements from the vendors, he's selected. So they are not used, for example, to procure orchestrator solution. They are not used to procure DevOps tools. They are not used to procure things that need development, things that need efforts to provide a value. So they are very used to buy a box. Second thing on the box culture, that procurement has different KPI, design has different KPI, operation has different KPI. So you'll find that every one of them is actually looking on his box, looking on the value that he's providing and his KPIs. They don't share a common KPI. That's why in reality you find that there are a lot of politics here between the teams, because they have different KPIs, and most probably some KPIs are contradicting, but they don't share a common KPI. So continuing the box culture, that once the contract is issued, design teams or planning teams and implementation, they work to deploy this box, to bring the racks, to do the connectivity, do the configuration, and then at one stage comes the acceptance. Okay, and once you talk about the acceptance, you start to see the operation role. So operation are not involved in the beginning. They might be informed at some stage, but they are not informed really. No one in the operation working with design on the design. But at the end, they come to the picture when they do the acceptance, and then operation starts. So in telco, because they rely on vendor solutions, okay, and it is a box at the end. So the vendor does the acceptance and the operation is there. Vendors usually babysit the solution for maybe 1 or 2 months, or which is a maintenance period. He's 100% responsible, and then hand over either to the operation or even hand over to the managed service provided by the same vendor. So you see, some telco operators, they don't even have resources to do the operation by themselves. They rely on the vendor's managed service, and that's number one. Number two, if they have operation by themselves, by the operator to manage the solution, it is still a box. So it is still a box that there is no really sense of development, software development, software product. It's a very legacy box, and it's a legacy mindset because again the KPIs are completely different. For example, operations here in the telco, the KPI is to keep this system stable. So they will always resist any kind of change proposed by the design. But this doesn't mean that operation are like they're not good and design is good. No, the other way around, it happens. When the operation finds a problem, okay, and that's impacting the KPIs, and then they report that to design, normal design said, no, we don't have anything. You have accepted the solution. So it's a very well-known conflict between design and operation in the telco. With the telco mindset, sorry, with the box mindset, this actually makes all the teams siloed and unfortunately not working in a collaborative way. So the takeaway here, when you talk about DevOps, because we get a lot of requests about DevOps and Telecom, But the first thing that we ask or you assess is the applicability. Is DevOps is applicable to your environment? Are you a software-centric environment? Are you delivering software products? So what's happening in the telco, and the majority, maybe some have evolved, but there is no real software delivery of products, either internally. For example, they are not having this kind of internal services. For example, cloud offering service for the IMS team, IT is offering service for, it's not like that. And they are not offering externally products, because most of the products, most of the enterprise products are very legacy. It might be corporate APNs, it might be secure connectivity, it might be maybe SD-WAN and IP MPLS. So the services are limited, for example, compared to hyperscaler, for example. The box culture dominates. So procurement get a box, design a box, and then hand over a box to the operation. There is no real collaboration between the teams. One of the big issues that each department or each team have different KPIs. So each one is striving to keep his own KPIs. It's a pure waterfall methodology. The project works in a pure waterfall methodology. There is no any sense of agile development, agile deployment. And I will give an example about the cases where agile comes into picture. Fifth point, procuring man-days is not common. And this is a very important point, because, for example, when you procure an automation solution, for example, you procure Ansible, you procure orchestration. This is very different when you procure a media gateway, or you procure a P gateway or 5G core or whatever, because 5G core should work as a 5G core. But if you bring an automation layer or orchestration layer without use case, then it will not do anything, right? Because you don't have use case. There is nothing in the standards called automation layer. I mean, in the 3GPP, for example. So you need to have a use case. And if you don't have a use case, you need to purchase a mandate, because at the end, you need to do a joint team between you, your developers, and the vendor developers to do software delivery of, for example, in services. These are the use cases of the automation orchestration. So you need to procure mandates, not just the software. But having this kind of mandates is not common, because operators, telco operators, they didn't do that with any telco vendor before. Telco Cloud, unfortunately, in 2012 was introduced following the same legacy model, so it didn't change the mentality, unfortunately. And even moving between these processes is a very manual administrative process. So that's the culture in the telco. That should change into a collaborative culture. That should change to product oriented, that we all deliver a product, so we all share the same KPI. When we do that, any kind of practice will work and any kind of tools will work. But the problem that telco operators, they go for tools and technology before they consider such culture, such organizational culture at the beginning. So let's all acknowledge this really great quote from Bill Gates. I personally like it. That if you have an efficient operation, an efficient process, making use of the culture in the organization, and then you apply automation, then this magnifies the efficiency. But if you have inefficient operation, and you have siloed teams, and you have administrative processes, and you have a lot of legacy stuff, and then you introduce an automation layer, this will magnify the inefficiency. And this is something that I witnessed personally in all my last 6 years. It is happening, right? So if you don't work on the process, if you don't work on the culture and the organization, and then you start just to introduce automation tools and orchestration tools, this will magnify the inefficiency. So DevOps is not the end goal, okay? DevOps is not the end goal. The end goals that you need to accelerate your product delivery, service delivery. So DevOps will help you to do that. You have the right culture. You are enabling set of practices by set of tools. Two, accelerate service products, to have an assured service quality and reliability, that's the end goal, you need to have an efficient operational model. If you are going for DevSecOps, you're having a built-in security capabilities, as I explained, from the development phase across all the software delivery life cycle, and you have an efficient resource utilization and skill set distribution. And that's important, because you find sometimes that like you have like multiple resources doing one stuff and another entity is completely relying on the vendors. So while you can actually enforce some set of practices that help you to distribute the resource and have some sort of a horizontal task force or common team doing everything. Even from the learning perspective, that's a very healthy environment. This will encourage the employees and the resources, the engineers, to work and to learn new things, because you are giving him big exposure to the full life cycle. I'm sure you also the case where people like spend years doing operation or spend years doing development. So if you do this kind of things, it will be even better for the company working environment and for the employees themselves. Let me take one question. In what field of education can this technology apply? In any field, in any domain, this technology apply, because it's about the culture and about the practices that help you to accelerate software delivery. So if you are a software-centric environment providing software, then this technology applies. And you'll see that when you say, for example, infrastructure as a code, so from the name itself, so you are turning the infrastructure to software. And once you do that, then you are in a software-centric environment, so you can apply the techniques. So any field, I mean, it can be applied in any field. Is MLOps and DevOps have same understanding? The same concept, but for sure MLOps has, I would say, different techniques and things. I'm also focusing on machine learning, so it might be a good topic for next webinar. Another question is, okay, quality is always forgot when corporate in rush and hurry for a development. What could help in ensuring quality assurance as part of the development? That's a good question. Okay, how you make sure that you are enforcing quality assurance as part of the development? You see in Telco nowadays, and it's very common, for example, in orchestration and automation, that you have, and even in cloud, that you have multiple environments. Okay, you have lab, you have staging, you have production. So what we see that part of the pipeline that you are building, for example, to deploy a certain service in production, there is a stage where you do this kind of testing and assurance on the staging. So it's an identical environment to the production. You do that. You and in an automated way via the DevOps practice, you do the production delivery, the production deployment. So it is there. I think I can shed some light about it in the tools maybe. Let me do that. So let's move forward. So now we come to the practices, the trending term that you always hear, right? Like the continuous integration, continuous delivery, infrastructure as a code. So these are the practices that will help you to go from one stage to another stage in the CI/CD pipeline that I showed, okay? And these practices cannot be enforced if you have the right culture in the organization. And these practices are fulfilled by the tools, okay? So you'll find tools like Jenkins, like Chef, like whatever. These are the tools that are fulfilling these practices. I can read the slide. So the build automation, and you can say that build and continuous integration can be easily labeled with the development. So that's the process of preparing the code for deployment, and there are many tools doing that. Continuous integration, when you, after development, when you try to merge the code into a certain repository or a versioning system where you merge the code into either the existing code or the code repo in general. Continuous delivery and continuous deployment, and this is a CD. Some people say that CD is delivery and CD is deployment. There are many definitions for what is the difference between delivery and deployment. For me, delivery is actually this is how I interpret. Delivery is the whole process that guarantees that you can deploy at any time, at any environment. Continuous deployment is actually pushing frequent change to a certain production environment. So for me, in telco in general, when we talk about CD, we refer it to continuous deployment, but in some other cases or some contexts, it can be continuous delivery. Infrastructure as a code, the one that I had a question about, it is simply, you see that most of the focus of DevOps, maybe you could have seen that in the slide, about the software, about the product. But why we cannot apply the same techniques on the infrastructure if we treat the infrastructure as a code? For example, we maintain the infrastructure configuration in the repo, and once we do a new data center, for example, set up a new expansions, we use the same techniques we use for software development. So infrastructure as a code, commonly used by the infrastructure teams to handle the expansion of existing DCs, building new DCs. So this is the infrastructure management. Configuration management, and we as Telco, we have good experience in that, doing that by our configuration tools. But now we have a lot of tools that actually handle this part, that make sure that to keep the state of the configuration, do, for example, backup and restore. Orchestration, this is the thing that I'm going to show you maybe in the last slide, that will help you, for example, to do the continuous delivery while having the monitoring and the closed loop control. For example, you do a lifecycle management of the software. So you deploy a software and then you monitor something. For example, there's a need for a scale, and then you take an action to scale. So orchestration and automation are synonyms for the same word, although they have, from my perspective, they have different definitions, but it is there as one of the practices of the DevOps. Continuous monitoring, you'll find that a lot of cloud stacks, a lot of software stacks, a lot of orchestration solution has this capability to do the monitoring for whatever applied to fulfill the infinite loop. And then microservices actually is helping us to deploy DevOps practice. Why? Because in old days, we used to have a bulky software system that have one operating system. And in order to do upgrade, to add a feature or to do whatever, it's actually a hectic action that needs a window for downtime, and it's done in a very legacy way because it's a bulky software which has like one operating system. But microservice, you start to have the whole product service based on microservice, and each microservice, for example, can have an independent lifecycle management flow in terms of upgrade, in terms of scale, in terms of whatever software action you want to take it on it. So actually, microservice is one of the ingredients of the DevOps, and that's why you will find in the last slide, I will tell you that there are opportunities coming with new technologies. For example, if you know that 5G core is based on containers and it is based on microservices, then this might be an opportunity for telcos to introduce DevOps practices with the 5G, for example. Take one question and then I'll go quickly for the tools. There's a good question about can we adapt the DevOps methodologies to legacy non-cloud-based telco systems? Well, yes and no. Yes, that you can do the mapping and turning whatever you can turn to a software-centric product. For example, what is legacy in telecom? Let's say you want to provide a corporate APN service, which is a legacy service, have been there since the 2000s, right? So if you treat the corresponding configuration of the corporate APN like a code, so you deal with configuration like with scripts and codes, then you can think of it as if you are introducing a software service, and based on that, you try to adopt the practice of DevOps. However, as I told you, when we do this assessment, for example, we look for two things. We look for the applicability, and that's what I was explaining, that the idea of mapping a legacy service to be a software, and the maturity. The maturity is actually the surrounding systems or the surrounding processes. Can it allow us, for example, to do continuous integration, continuous deployment, or we still need to follow, for example, a legacy way of deployment? So the answer is not easy, but it is yes, because it's happening, and it is part of our assessment that we usually do. We assess the legacy services, and we take some candidates to be somehow migrated or subjected to the DevOps. But know that sometimes this is not possible because of the surrounding processes for this thing. Okay, then question about how DevOps vendors overcome this challenge with the customer. So about the mindset, about the box culture. Well, it is really a challenge, because usually DevOps is not a product supplied by a certain vendor. So there should be also a contribution from the operator itself, building the skill set and the capabilities in his team. And across the years, he should take over the full pipeline. So there is no vendor of a DevOps, but the real challenge that we face usually, that operators start to look to have RFPs for DevOps tools the same way they were purchasing boxes. And then we find that there are a lot of obstacles in terms of processes, in terms of use cases, of uncertainty, lack of collaboration between teams. And then we are not sure really what to do. So we continue doing, this kind of, legacy stuff, but we unfortunately, it is labeled by DevOps, but it's not DevOps, right? So it should come from the operator. I mean, this cannot be influenced by the vendors. And in the last slide, I'm bringing some opportunities. I mean, what are the opportunities that operators can take to take this step? We may take like 10 more minutes. Okay, so another question, that does the technology providers have the flexibility to provide agile type of professional services, or still locked in the box of a scope of work? So the problem here is that actually vendors, they follow the telco methodology. For example, if they start the process with the procurement in a box mentality, then vendors focus on the box stuff and they provide box-oriented solution. But if since the start the process allows the vendors to show their capabilities in terms of offering agile solutions, for example, if the customer is looking for a model where like 50-50, like 50% coming from the vendor, 50% coming from the team, and then eventually after 5 years, this should hand over to the customer team. So this kind of techniques in the beginning are the ones who actually not force, are the ones who shape the direction of the vendor, whether the vendor are going to provide a very box stuff, related stuff, or help the vendor to position the right solution. For example, all the vendors, all the system integrators, they have a nice DevOps stuff, solution, nice strategy stuff, nice assessment way of doing, working with the customers. But unfortunately, the way the RFX is drafted forces the vendors to go to a certain direction, which at the end eventually ends or doesn't actually deliver the goal, which is actually accelerated services, accelerated products. You might have heard about operators that saying that VNF onboarding are taking months, right? So it took months because the whole process didn't start in the right way. We are still dealing with the cloud software with the same box mentality. I don't want to take much time on this one. So for the tools, there are a lot of tools, and I brought here a URL that you can use. A lot of tools that fits to all stages of the CI/CD or the DevOps, which is plan, source code management, CI, testing. So it's up actually to the operator, telco operator, or to the one building the pipeline on which tools to use to fulfill a certain practice. But again, tools are the easiest stuff because there are open source tools, vendors are providing tools. You can always have tools, but with no right processes, with no right culture, with no right use case, these all tools are useless. Okay, so I will not take much time in the tools because you can easily I would say route them. Me personally, I worked with Jira, Slack. I worked with GitLab for source code management. I worked with Maven, JFrog, Artifactory. I worked with Jenkins, for sure, Ansible. And in the monitoring, for example, people working on Telco Cloud, I'm sure they worked with Xenos, Nagios, and FluentD. Currently, I'm working with Prometheus, the first one. So there are a lot of nice tools in the market, and this is not, I would say, the hardest part on deploying the DevOps. So I have two, I have two slides. That's my last slide, which is the opportunity, okay? Because some people, in the telco domain, they think that maybe in order to adopt DevOps, we have to do a huge reorg, and then we spend months doing reorg, and then nothing happens, right? But there are always chances. I mean, and you don't have really to collapse teams to do, I would say, a dramatic change in the organization to introduce technology. But what we see is that with each new technology arriving, like 5G, with each new service you want to introduce or a product, that's an opportunity, because once you all gather on a product, for example, I brought here like one screenshot from 3GPP talking about network slice. So from network slice perspective, and that's from 3GPP, that's what Telco likes, right? There is a design environment where you do a preparation, you do the modeling of what network slice service you want to provide. And then there's a lifecycle management of network slice, which is the runtime, where you do the activation, reporting, modification, integration. So it looks like a very good opportunity to embrace such a product, okay, and try to build on top of it by enforcing some practices that enable this product, and engage multiple teams from different departments like design, operation, with a KPI related to the product, and have some sort of task force team horizontally across all departments to deliver such product to the customer. So our KPI will be that product to the customer. That's why I'm saying that each new technology, when you are introducing a new technology like 5G, for example, so 5G comes with container, with microservices, comes with nice enterprise services. So that's a good start where you have a motivation to do a change, okay? When you all gather to deliver a service or product to the market, that's also another change, another opportunity, sorry, that you have to grab. So at the end, this slice, okay, will require an orchestration design time environment. You will do the modeling, testing, certification, CI/CD. So that looks really a nice candidate to deploy DevOps practice on it, right? You can have one team called 5G task force. You can have like slicing task force team across design, operation, service assurance, whatever, and they all participate on that like new pipeline where you do the modeling of the service, you do the testing, you do certification, and then you launch the service, and then you get feedback about the FMPM assurance, and then you get some kind of closed loop action. So this is a perfect start, perfect kickoff to enforce this kind of practice. So you will have a design time, and you will have a runtime environment, which can be staging, can be production sites, can be customer premises. So you can deploy on multiple productions. And then because of the right orchestration engine that you have and automation engine, you do the monitoring, continuous monitoring. And then once the engine detects there's a need to scale, there's a need to heal, there's a need to do whatever, then you have this closed control loop. And closed control loop, it's a very common in the orchestration engines. When you deploy something, when you execute something, and then you do the monitoring, by Prometheus, by Zenus, by whatever, and then you detect there is an input, there is a failure, there is a CPU to high utilization, there's a certain KPI degradation, and then you took another action, another execution. So, and at the end, this is all updated. This is all updated into an inventory or some sort of a repository. So these are the ingredients of any orchestration solution. So it's a good opportunity to transit from product mindset, from box mindset to product mindset. Whenever you introduce a new technology, a new service, or a new product, that's the right time. I wanted to end with this slide because maybe the previous slides showed that it's really a little bit, I was a little bit pessimistic, but it's not the case. There are always opportunities. There are always opportunities to bring this kind of agility into the organization with the introduction of new technologies. And I gave an example of the network slicing or 5G in particular. That was my last slide. Sorry, I took 10 minutes out of the original time. I hope I hope you enjoyed it. It was a little bit, I would say, bringing information from different domains, like from the culture, from the practice, and for sure from the tools. And I meant to map everything to the telco domain for colleagues working on DevOps or software development, understand the telco anatomy, and the other way around. Also, I wanted the colleagues from telco domain understand what DevOps mean and what kind of benefits it can bring. I have some questions. So, for example, one question about how would DevOps be useful for a wholesale telco service provider? Well, a wholesale telco service provider, that's a service provider providing wholesale services, so services for we call B2B, B2X to enterprises. So as long as you are providing a service, then the service lifecycle management can be curated into a DevOps practice or a DevOps pipeline. For example, the way you do the modeling, the way you do the testing, the way you deploy the service, and even the way you monitor the service, all these can be curated by DevOps. So DevOps can be a very, that can be a practical example on how what are the benefits of DevOps for wholesale telco service provider. Even the way customers purchase a service, for example, through a marketplace or a digital marketplace, that can be considered somehow from the plan phase in the DevOps. For example, that can trigger a request coming through Jira, for example, to start modeling a certain service or to start deploy the service. So that even the full life cycle starting from the ordering can be considered as part of the DevOps. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I will collect all the questions, and I'll try to group them all and answer them maybe offline on the LinkedIn.